about methods that he could be a self-directed learner and go across self-development outside of professional military education stuff, what would you recommend they focus on?
I would ask them first off, what's their goal? First, what's their personal goal in 5 to 10 years? And then if they know where that goal is, then that's where I would direct them towards. For example, at my previous unit, we had a guy that while we were over in Afghanistan, he set up a nonprofit organization for Afghan war widows to sell their the scarves, the handmade scarves, to sell them on the international market. It was phenomenal. You never think a fighter pilot, first off, to be smart enough to do this, but secondly, to be motivated to do it. But his personal goal was to do these type of nonprofit organizations to actually, and quite honestly, what he did was more important strategically than any bomb that we dropped while we were over there, But so, in his case specifically, we mentored him and we recommended that he does a lot of leadership development towards humanitarian assistance, more towards business models, those sorts of things. So it wasn't military related at all, but it was related to where he saw himself in 5 years and kind of what his personal interests were. So that's one example from a personal perspective. From a professional perspective, I would say, what is first off your MOS and what is that next stepping stone in your MOS career progression? Okay, if it is I'm going to go from being a platoon leader to a company commander, well, the big difference there is leader to commander. So let me make sure that I understand what my command responsibilities are going to be. Let me make sure that I can understand what a lot of those family support agencies are that would help me as a commander. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yes.
So I'd ask you, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
In terms of my military career, sir, so my tentative duty location is at Fort Polk, the Joint Readiness Training Center. So once I get in there, I'll be in HAC tentatively, try to get a PL position, move into an assistant S2 position before I manage to become first lieutenant promotable. At first lieutenant promotable, seek out the captain's career course, which is when I transition to military intelligence. So having that assistant S2 time will be a very formative experience to me, but also the fact that I'm at Joint Readiness Training Center is going to be very enlightening in terms of just war operations, seeing a variety of units come through, and being able to actually interact with that. Interesting place.
Well, and it is. I mean, having flown, having been at the JRTC, it will be. It'll be a little fire hose when you first get there, and you're going to focus a lot on doing the JRTC mission. If you're going to want to become an assistant S2 in the near future, then there always has to be that eye towards, well, what does that MOS require? And that's where I would initially start looking. I would talk to folks that I would recommend talking to folks that are S2s right now. In that case, so they can help set you on a path towards success. A little bit of a mentor relationship there with them, but quite honestly, it's worked for them, so you kind of vector yourself with them.
Yes, sir.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Any other Air Force specific? I'll throw that one out there. Nice.
Sir, what do you think of the A-10?
What do I think of the A-10? No, that's a great question.
It's a good place to start.
I'll tell you right now, the A-10 is the absolute best aircraft at what it does. I think extremely highly of the A-10, without a doubt. As an F-15E guy, about 80% of my mission is air to ground, so dropping bombs, attempting to do close air support as well as the A-10, and about 20% of it is air to air. In a perfect world, I would definitely keep the A-10 without a doubt, because not only is it the best aircraft for it, but the pilots that fly the A-10s, the folks that maintain it, they are as committed to a joint, guys on the ground as anybody that we're doing. I'll be honest with you on that. One thing that we've had an issue with, really over the course of the last 10 years, is what we define as close air support. Okay, close air support is troops in contact. There's requiring any type of munitions to require close contact with forces, with other ground forces. We've gotten into this mentality that a B-1, a B-52, and F-15E is doing close air support, and that's not quite the case when you start looking at really what doctrinally close air support is. Okay. In Afghanistan and in Iraq, B-1 B-1s, B-52s, F-15s, F-16s, they do air-to-ground integration well enough. But do they do it as well as what we expect to maybe the next war? So what I'm saying is, we should keep the A-10. I love it. I have friends that have flown it. I think there's a lot of fiscal decisions that are being made that one of the reasons the A-10 is being at least talked about things like that. But now here's a political thing. So anybody know where the biggest A-10 base is? Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona. Anybody know who the chairman of the Senate Armed Service Committee is? Senator John McCain from Arizona. You know who the biggest who the biggest proponent is for keeping the A-10 in? Representative Martha McSally from Arizona, who happened to be a former A-10 pilot. Okay, so do I think the A-10 is going anywhere? No, I don't. And from an Air Force perspective, it shouldn't go anywhere. From a personal perspective, excuse me, it shouldn't go anywhere until we've actually had a viable replacement identified. F-35s are awesome, but they're 2022, not 2015. So, if that answers your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What else, Air Force? I saw, I think, one or two other hands. So in your time here in Army ROTC, have you dropped knowledge on the Air Force?
I kind of hid that pass behind me, sir. No.
Valid. All right.
We talked briefly about it, sir. There's the rivalry in between the Air Force and every branch, but we're all out there fighting a common goal. So regardless of what branch you're in, we're learning from one another. We jointly come together. So everybody has their own specialty, and everybody has something that we bring to the table. So that's pretty much it.
Dude, I'll tell you, what you just said was beautiful from an 06 perspective. Because, 10, 15 years ago, we would not have heard a cadet, or a second lieutenant, that would have said, hey, we're all in this together. There would have been an Air Force thing, there would have been an Army thing, there would have been a Navy thing, and there would have been a Marine thing. I mean, that's why we had Goldwater Nichols a couple of, 1986. That's why you have to be you have to be a joint qualified person in order to become a general officer, is because there was that forced jointness. If there's one benefit, quite honestly, what we've seen over the last 10 to 15 years, it's that everybody at every rank realizes it's one team, one fight. It is truly joint out there. And I would tell you, it's great to have service pride. I'll tell you, I could probably recite the scores of every Air Force Army game for the last 10 years. I could probably do that. I won't.
Because you've won most of them.
Just don't write Navy grad here.
But no, you're absolutely right. It's all about the joint. And from a senior officer perspective, once you have demonstrated that tactical competency in your MLS, once you've demonstrated the leadership capability, as a leadership team with your ACO, the next step is I want you to be that truly joint officer. And that's just a personal opinion, but that's what we try to push, for some of our folks, especially dudes that are going combat, or especially officers that are going to CCT.
Would you say the Air Force is more of a corporate environment than seeing my friends? They don't go to the field. So I'm just wondering.
What do you define as a corporate environment?
More like office.
Yeah.
Like the adults and lieutenants.
Well, I spoke to a friend of mine that was in the Air Force as well, and he kind of defined it in a way where in the Army you got an officer corps supporting you in the enlisted main body, and in the Air Force you have an officer main body supported by the enlisted corps. Almost the complete opposite. So I mean that was probably the easiest concept you could use. It made sense to me, and I don't know if you can agree with that.
I would tend to agree with that, whether you call it a corporate environment, whether you look at it from that perspective, because it goes back to the culture that we talked about a little bit earlier. I mean, for most of our history, even Billy Mitchell back in 1917 or whatever it was, it was always, the Air Force was always this, very pilot-focused, we're going to go out, we're going to fly jets, we're going to drop bombs, those type of things. So yeah, you had the maintainers, you had the folks that would stay at your base, whether it was B-52s at Barksdale or F-15s at Bagram, Afghanistan. You had them that would stay at the base, and they wouldn't necessarily, I would say, fully participate, at least the same way that Navy or Marine Corps guy would. So you have that type of corporate mentality. You have that enlisted support to the officer type of mentality. It's changing. It really is, because this is interesting, take a look at Air Force recruiting posters from 15 years ago. It was all about F-22s, F-15s, those type of things. Take a look at the recruiting posters now. It's about combat controllers. It's about the space guys. It's about UAVs and guys doing cyber with those little weird microphones, those type of things, right? It's a cultural shift that you're seeing manifested from a recruiting perspective. So corporate, maybe I think everybody's maybe going a little bit more corporate, but yeah, there's definitely a shift based on how we expect to fight wars in the future. Sir.
So on that note, from your experience or seeing some of your, some of the other fighter pilots coming up behind you and having to understand, once they get classified as a fighter pilot, that they have to transition to a UAV pilot, how does that go for those gentlemen or those pilots, those officers? Is that pretty tough to swallow that deal, or, how did that go?
It is.
For
For
the
some of the
Army.
folks, it is pretty tough. The Air Force has actually worked pretty well in force shaping, is what we call it, looking at volunteers first, and if we can't find volunteers, then sending folks over there. They've tried to offset that kind of with bonuses as well as some quality of life things, but it has been a fairly bitter pill for some folks to swallow.
Are you guys losing officers because of that, or?
We are. It's not necessarily that so much as one of the biggest issues the Air Force has always had, at least on the officer side, has been, are the airlines hiring?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Because once the airlines start hiring, it is. It really is. And it's like nuclear engineers in the Navy. It's the same thing. So that's always been a concern. I'll tell you, I think 5-10 years from now, we're going to see the same thing with cyber officers. I really do. You're going to see cyber guys just jumping to get out because they've got a great experience in the military. They've got a great special experience identifier or whatever. They've got a top secret clearance. Those are things that the corporate world is going to pay a lot. Which goes back, I think, to your question or your comment about corporate versus the military. 50 years ago, dudes were shooting guns, and there was really not that much of a civilian equivalent. Now we've got cyber RPAs with Department of Homeland Security, UAVs, those type of things. So.
I think you had a question on here.
Yeah.
So the Army right now is doing what I would consider to be soul searching, especially with things like CDRP 3-0, winning in a complex world. Kind of what our role is and how future conflicts are going to look. Is the Air Force also experiencing its own form of soul searching and kind of find a role to fill in the future?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. See, the Army, personal opinion, the Army I think is always very secure because you're always going to need some guy on the ground to win a war, to win a conflict. Even if we're doing humanitarian assistance or disaster relief, you've got to have somebody there that's there to hand out the MRE or the medical package. That's just the way it is. Whether it's a high-end, major conflict with China, Iran, North Korea, whoever, or whether it's those HADL. So you're always going to have some guy on the ground. One of the biggest issues that we've had in the Air Force is, and I swear, we go back to the way that Billy Mitchell was always talking about the Air Force. We're going to go out and drop bombs, we're going to sink ships. Then you look at Curtis LeMay, in SAC in the 1940s. We're going to go out and drop nuclear bombs and fire bomb Tokyo, And then, so it was always very much this annihilation type method. Annihilation, really, after Desert Storm, doesn't work too well because you've got precision munitions, those type of things. So now, what is our reason for being? That's why you're seeing a big push for space. You're seeing a big push for cyber. That's why our Chief of Staff and the Secretary of the Air Force, got sacked a couple of years ago. And right now, I think the Air Force is actually pretty secure in our joint commission because there's the mobility. There's ISR.
And we're contributing that ISR capability not only to our own ground forces, but also our allied ground forces around the world.
Yeah, and that's another important part when we talk about the Army being secure. It's if you're a Malaysia, you're in India, the one thing that you have is a lot of dudes. It's very. I won't say it's easy, but you can have a ground force. What you don't have is maybe a whole lot of money to spend $150 million on an F-22, or $80 million on a C-17. So the Army, you will always have, I think, a train, advise, and assist role with our partner or our allied nations. Not so much with the Navy or with the Air Force. And that's just based upon, you know, how we fight, the toys we have, if you will. Does that kind of make sense? So job security, yay. Nah, we'll see. Just kidding. Cool. I think I've got a couple more minutes. Anything else? Is it 2:30?
Sure, yeah. That clock, yes, sir, you got about 5 minutes or another question or two? Okay,
So being a cadet the last couple of years here, kind of brought up in the Air Force culture, being kind of developed into a leader to lead airmen. But in reality, there's a lot of jobs where you're going to be working like integrated with Army, Navy, et cetera like that. Especially going into, if I become a STO, leading like teams of Rangers or SEALs. If you had any advice for kind of like adapting to those different kind of cultures and leading those kind of men.
Understand the culture, because a Ranger, a SEAL, and a combat controller are three very different organizations. So that's the first thing I always say is understand the culture. The other part is going to go into confidence as well. I mean, you know, you say Green Beret, you say Ranger, you say SEAL. There's a certain connotation that comes with that. You say combat controller, and quite honestly, outside of the soft world, people are like, what's a combat controller? But I will tell you that inside of the soft world, combat controllers are revered. Because in addition to, you know, the 80-pound pack, they're also carrying about 45 pounds of communications gear, you know, those type of other things.
You talk to any platform, anywhere, bring
Sure.
thunder from down under.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then I would say, without a doubt, you're unabashedly proud of what you're doing, not only from a mission perspective, but also from what you're bringing for that joint fight. Because it's just like you said, man, it's all about the joint world, especially when we start talking about special operations. It really is.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you have any more questions about any kind of those types of personalities, come on over and talk. We've got some people in our organization that can talk to you about that kind of stuff.
Well, I guess as far as for my closing comments, first off, I would say thank you for listening for the last hour. I truly appreciate it. I hope it wasn't a total waste of your time, but most importantly, I would like to say congratulations on the fact that you all will be second lieutenants here in, I guess, 27 days. So, seriously, embrace it. I mean, I got to tell you, being a second lieutenant, being a first lieutenant in the military, just the latitude that you have is going to be phenomenal. I don't think I'd want to trade with you from a paycheck and from a responsibility perspective, but from a fun perspective, I would trade with you all in an absolute heartbeat, man. So congratulations and have fun. Thank you.
Sir. Hey, on behalf of the senior class of the spring of 2015,